I'm Andy Shepherd. I'm the head of business architecture, which is involving a number of areas at the moment. One of which is overseeing a fairly small automation team, which is really what the focus of this conversation's on.
Thanks for giving up some of your time to talk to me about what your plans are. Maybe first, if you could just start by just kind of telling us what are some of the key challenges Sheffield City Council's facing at the minute, and why you think implementing RPA might help.
Yeah, sure. I don't think we're alone with the kind of current circumstances, particularly the sort of financial challenges that I think all councils are facing at the moment. And I guess what that means is we're constantly looking at how we can deliver better services at lower cost. And really, this is where I see automation coming in, and we've been exploring how automation can help with that challenge. I think it's fair to say we're pretty much in the infancy of our journey on this. It's only the start, but we have had some successes, some good successes. But it's also starting to highlight where there's some challenges for us, I think, and that's where we kind of see RPA playing a role. I think one of the biggest issues we've got is our infrastructure is made up of a mixture of sort of newer systems and some older legacy applications, and particularly legacy applications is where we're having the biggest challenges. We can't necessarily get data from them or input data to them easily, and it becomes a very sort of human manual process. And I think where RPA kind of unlocks some opportunities for us is if we can start interacting better with some of these legacy applications, it creates this whole new set of automation opportunities, a load of new processes we can do. We can better integrate our systems, and I think that's where RPA is probably going to give us an advantage that we don't have at the moment.
That's really interesting. We talk a lot about legacy applications. We call it legacy spaghetti, because it's trying to untangle all of that horrible legacy stuff. Particularly in councils that have hundreds of systems and have grown them and developed them over years and years and years. But yeah, that kind of, and a lot of those application vendors aren't particularly helpful in terms of open APIs and their ability for you to hook into their systems and get the data you need. So I suppose what you're saying is you see RPA as a sort of kind of an easier way to do that.
Yeah, I think it's a bridge, and vendors are different. You'll get some who are really good to work with, helpful, can understand what we're trying to do, and help us get there. I think others are probably investing less in their products at the moment, and maybe that building of open APIs isn't on their agenda. So rather than just have them as this application that's constantly going to be kind of sidelined a little bit, RPA does act as that bridge, or should act as that bridge to kind of join them together.
Yeah. So you said that you've had some successes already, and I know you've done some automation already with the Microsoft Power Platform. So maybe just tell us a little bit about kind of what you've been trying to do so far. But I'm kind of interested then if you've been using the Microsoft Power Platform, kind of why have you decided to invest in the Liberty RPA one? Yeah,
and it's a fair question. The Power Platform is actually really powerful, and we've got a lot out of it. We've managed to do a number of processes around things like financial integrations, applications for different services. We've leveraged some of the artificial intelligence to do that kind of forms reading. So we're getting a lot out of it, and I'm not going to criticise the Power Platform for what it can deliver, but there does seem to be a bit of a gap in functionality when it comes to some of the RPA side of it. We have tested it, we've used it, and we seem to hit these sort of common barriers around things like the idiosyncrasies of some of the legacy systems. A common problem that I think most people have is they don't act the same way every time. So your load screens are running at different rates, and just small things like that can make the whole flow fail. And that's where we start getting some issues. And this is where we kind of looked at the market and said, well, there's probably not the native functionality within the Power Platform that addresses some of these problems. And we looked at the market and sort of looked at what the options were. I guess where Liberty kind of stood out for us was it had the mixture of some sort of unique features to address some of the problems we're having, but also had a much easier user interface that actually means we've got the ability to potentially open up use of Liberty wider than we could the Microsoft offer at the moment. And that's really, kind of our direction of travel is we want to democratize as much of this as possible. The more people using it, the greater power we can get out of it. That kind of was the key driver, but underpinning that is cost as well. Obviously, I mentioned earlier that there's financial implications of doing this kind of thing, and Liberty gave us that low cost of entry, but also the ability to scale up as we grew with it. So all those things kind of ticked our major boxes.
So yeah, I mean, clearly the Microsoft platform, is there and has its place. But as you say, when you start to scale up and want to do maybe some of the more advanced automations, and particularly if you've got particularly complicated legacy infrastructure, then yeah, going for something that's kind of built for that task. I mean, they can coexist, but I suppose it's how you want to apply them.
The Power Platform's been really effective at. But when we do need to start accessing the legacy applications, we can trigger that or trigger Liberty RPA to do that. So I think you're right. It's about having that mixed infrastructure. It's not an all or nothing on one or another. It's finding the right thing for the right task.
And that scaling up bit's important as well. So you can we've got a thing called try RPA where you can actually dip your toe in the water, but actually try and maybe one or two bots and sort of seeing how you get on and then scaling that up. I think that's another attractive thing with the Liberty platform.
Yeah, and we use the try RPA. We found it quite helpful to understand how it actually works. I think part of the problem is when you get hands-on with tools, they can be quite different to how you see them presented. And things like the user interfaces are always good to test in practice. So I think that was a helpful kind of step in the journey for us, was to make sure actually when we're hands-on, does it feel like we can use it and leverage it as we thought?
Yeah.
Obviously, the experience was positive enough to push forward with it.
Well, that's good to hear. And yeah, when you buy any product, if you're going to be making an investment for the longer term, having that ability to make sure that it's the right fit is important. So you mentioned, obviously you've been doing some work on this already. So kind of what are the first areas that you're going to be applying, the Liberty RPA tool to?
So if we build an integration with a particular system, for example, our corporate finance system for a particular process, we want to be able to keep reusing that. And every time we need to interact with it, we've kind of already got that built. So I guess short term, we've got a few processes, things like free school meals, some supplier searches and creation that we want to sort of focus on as the immediate priority. But I think the longer term ambition is got to be build the ability to interact with these applications, and as new processes are identified, we just want to pick those code blocks as much as we can, try and connect them up, and then we've got less build to do. So we're trying to be a bit strategic with it rather than just looking at individual processes and come out with that almost library of bits we can integrate.
So, I mean, presumably the council, as Sheffield City Council, as with pretty much every council in the country, is facing some pretty difficult financial challenges. So I'm guessing that this project has some kind of financial targets associated with it.
Yeah, it does. I think we've tried to take the view that it needs to deliver financial benefits, but actually it's also there to deliver better customer outcomes. It's going to be quite key in doing that, and also set some of our strategic infrastructure. So it absolutely has a savings drive, as you can imagine, given where we currently are. But it's not just about the finance. It's actually creating a potentially whole different way of engaging and working with customers, or serving customers, I should say, and different opportunities that we wouldn't have if we weren't looking at automation as a whole. So, and they are quite challenging targets as well. I mean, the investment we've made in automation at the moment is pretty small in truth, but we're expecting to pay that back a number of times over as part of this.
Yeah. So there's a return on investment on the kind of the platform, but then you multiply that investment as you automate processes and get the efficiencies from those as well.
Yeah, that's right. And the investment we've made in the platform at this point is small. It's a very limited investment, which, as I say, gives us the opportunity to try it and grow it as we need to. We are expecting just a single process to give us that return on our investment, because the costs are so low. And then anything that we can do after that is just going to keep increasing that positive return.
Yeah.
And that's why the scalability is so important. It's not a huge amount to invest, but actually the potential upside is massive.
I suppose in terms of kind of thinking at the level of decision makers, chief director of finance, even chief executive, they're going to be interested in seeing if this can really kind of deliver the promise. And I suppose it's about building their confidence that a small investment can deliver a big outcome, and then potentially that helps make the case for more investment.
Yeah, and I think that's absolutely the right way of doing it. You don't want to make a huge investment in something that you haven't proven yet. And some of this technology is still quite new, particularly to local authorities, maybe not so much in the wider world. So you do have to have that business case. You do have to prove it to invest further. I guess what's helped with us is our sponsor for this is the finance director. So we've kind of got that direct engagement. He's very much involved in it, regular meetings, looking at progress. I think it makes it an easier sell when we can go back with the benefits on a regular basis and say, well, this is what we've managed to achieve in the last period. That does have a financial impact as well, because where we're not delivering something right first time, it's just creating that cycle of rework and not a great experience for the person who has to go through that and the staff as well. So they may not be seeing some of the immediate cashable saving, but actually it is having an impact on that whole system. It's reducing the demand, reducing the costs.
So trying to think about I'm interested in some of the specific processes or areas that you might be looking at. I don't know, maybe you can talk through kind of where you're planning to deploy this first and kind of what you think you might be able to achieve. So
I guess we're kind of looking at it from almost a systems basis and where we think that kind of integration with the legacy systems will give us most benefits. There's certainly something around our corporate finance system. I think the user experience of that isn't always positive. And actually, we think there's a lot of efficiencies across payments, reconciliation, a huge number of functions that kind of system supports. That will definitely be one of the ones we're going to focus on. There's also children's social care. We've historically had issues pulling data from that application, which again is kind of resulted in probably more manual processes than we would have liked. So if we can focus on those two initially and get some RPA solutions, again the opportunities suddenly broaden out far beyond what we can do now. And then it's a case of keep scaling it and using it elsewhere as well.
So when you talk about the finance systems, obviously, I'm guessing there's considerable amounts of manual efforts and rekeying and transferring information from one system to another system, and then obviously that the potential for errors in that transfer is massive as well. So it's kind of its reduction in errors, but also the efficiency of the transfer of data between the non-finance systems and the finance system.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is where automation comes into its own, because actually the efficiencies also bring that better accuracy, which brings further efficiencies because you're not doing the rework, you're not trying to find out why an error has happened and correct it. So yeah, absolutely. We're looking at how we can have better reconciliations, ideal real-time payments, real-time reconciliation, line of business systems integrated with a corporate finance system. It just allows you to have better data, better insights, but it also means you can do different things with customers. You can give them instant responses to queries rather than having some of the lags in the system as well. So it's really win-win-win, to be honest, in some of these areas.
Because there's something like, I think from my memory of Sheffield City Council, I think there's something like 30,000 housing rent balance inquiries that come to the contact centre every year. And if you can divert those away by having, RPA enabled, well, here's your rent balance, you don't need to get through to the contact centre. The contact centre can then deal with more important inquiries, or maybe not more important, but, more complex inquiries.
And I think that's part of the key, isn't it? You want to target the kind of contact and interaction for those customers who really need it. I think you probably find a core of that housing tenant group don't want to have this interaction. They don't want to have a phone call. They just want the answer there and then, as quickly and as easily as possible.
I mean, I know when you talk about return on investment with these things, it's really hard to quantify. But I mean, essentially, from the conversation we've just had, the return on the investment is kind of significant, even on a small investment, because it's not only efficiencies in processes, but it's efficiencies in data quality, and it's less failure demand at the contact center and online, which enables the organization to deliver more. So it's kind of, I suppose, is that something that you're thinking about how you quantify at the start of this project?
It is, and it is difficult. I think you're absolutely right. It's a lot easier if you're dealing with a standalone process where you can calculate how much time and effort goes into it and convert that into a sort of cashable saving. What we're looking at is where are we making the saving across the whole journey and experience for a person. So that doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to cash them all out as well. So it comes back to that point that it's not all about cashable savings. If we can quantify actually what does that save across a number of services, it gives us the opportunity to rethink, well, what do we want to do with that capacity that we've now saved? How can we reapply it to doing something else?
Yeah, that's really interesting. Last question from me is around just kind of, I mean, you've been on a bit of a journey already with automation, and you're about to sort of go on a further journey using Liberty RPA. But what would you say to other councils who are thinking about RPA? What are some of the things that they really should consider at the start?
We put the time in to explore RPA and what it could do, and the opportunities that's going to give us are huge. I was slightly concerned around the costs of entry to this. I must admit, it was something we'd looked at quite some time ago, and perhaps it wasn't as cost efficient as it is now. So I'd say it's definitely something to explore if you are in a position where your automation capability can't do what you need to do, particularly with legacy applications. And I think if you can kind of reimagine the world where you can potentially integrate a whole different range of applications, it does make you rethink how you could deliver services. It makes you think about your organizational design, how it could support a different way of working and operating. So I'd really encourage anyone in a similar situation to us to at least explore it. And so maybe engage as well with other local authorities that have done it, because we're really keen to sort of be part of a community, and I'd certainly welcome a conversation to share learning experience with others as well.
Well, it's been good to talk to you, Andy. Thanks for sharing where you're at and what your aspirations are for using Liberty RPA. I'm sure you'll be very successful, and we may come back to you in a few months and see how you're getting on. So thank you very much.
You're welcome, and it'd be great to have a follow-up conversation. I'm really enthusiastic and hopeful that we're going to do some really interesting things with the platform. So more than happy to share that.